The submission settings is the information that you'll need to capture from your users about each individual entry or work of art. Now, I'm on the submission settings page, and I'll go ahead and just get started by saying edit submission settings. The first setting you'll run into is the max applications or submissions per user, and I have that currently set to 7. And this will allow the user to add up to that amount. After that amount, they can't add any more into your call. The submission start date and end date are very important. The start date will prevent users from adding applications before that date, and the end date will prevent users from modifying or adding applications after that date. If a user enters a piece of art or a submission into your call, they're able to change the attachments, delete, edit settings, tweak up until this date. After this date, they can't edit any information at all about their submission. The only exception to that is if you, as the administrator user, reject their submission. Let's say this date has come and gone and you have a user that adds an application and you find an error in their application and you want them to fix it. You can reject it, and then that will allow them to make those changes and resubmit even after the deadline. We'll get to that a little bit later, but just so you know, that is a hard date. Next is the submission instructions. Whatever additional instructions you may want to provide, you can list here, and these instructions will be displayed right on the submission instructions page. We've already taken a look at the fees, but for those of you who aren't aware of how these fees work, they're underneath the setup fees page. Watch that video and that will tell you how the submission fees and multi-pay work. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the basics for the required information for all submissions. Now, every single submission must have a category and a subcategory, a title, and then attachments or images. Apart from that, everything else is optional. So I'm going to go ahead and just save these settings as they are and switch over to a sample user account and show you what it looks like for them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and log in here as Jane. Jane, let's say, has already registered an account, so she wants to now log in and add some new submissions. So I logged into Jane's account, and you can see right now she has 4 submissions. I'm going to go ahead and say add new application. It tells Jane right up here how many she's allowed. It tells her when the start and end date is and even how many days, minutes, and hours are remaining. So I'll go ahead and say add new application. And you can see I can choose the categories that you have set up and the associated subcategories for each of those main categories along with the title. Now, as soon as Jane enters in this submission, I'm going to go ahead and say submit entry details. This will email Jane a confirmation email, and then she's then able to, in step 2, add any attachments. So I'm just going to go ahead and select add attachment. She would then browse her hard drive for any of the attachments that belong to her submission. It can be many different file types. It can be JPEGs, MP4s, MP3s for music files, AIFs, PDFs, Word documents, text documents. Typically it's a JPEG file, which is what most users upload, but you are allowed many different types of files that your users can add. Let's go ahead and just do a sample here. Let's come into the site root and we'll go into images and we'll just pick a sample image here out of this default. So I'm just going to go ahead and upload this, and you'll see right away there's going to be an error, and it tells me this image can't be uploaded because it has to be at least 960 pixels. I have in my settings set up that users can't upload images that are too small. So if my images is not greater than that, it won't allow me to upload. I'm going to go ahead and add an image that's an adequate size next. So I'll click add attachment. I've got one here on my desktop that's from Unsplash. You can see that it's 4,000 by 3,000 there, which is adequate. Now, when you upload an image, it will create 3 versions of that image automatically. So we create a full size, which we call print resolution, and the default is 1920 pixels there. We create a medium size, which is about 1080, and a thumbnail, which you're seeing right here, which is about 100. Now, once I've uploaded this attachment, I can hit complete view entry, or you can add more attachments if you need. I'm going to go ahead and select complete and view entry, and you can see that entry is now fully done. There's the attachment. If I want to add additional attachments later, I can select add attachment and add those to the individual submission. In a default call, you can have up to 3 attachments. And we do that, for example, for maybe a 3D work that's a ceramic work. You may want to show the front and the back and maybe a close-up version. So your users can, if you enable them to add multiple attachments. All right. Let's go ahead and switch back to the submission settings and look at a few of the additional settings. All right, I'm going to go ahead and enable each of these optional fields here. And notice that they're all required except the URL. If you enable the URL, that one's always an optional field. And the URL is a special field, so I'm going to look at that in detail. So let's go ahead and just update those, and we'll jump back to Jane's account and show you what that changed. All right, let's go ahead and select Add New Application. I'm here logged in as Jane now. And notice because I enabled the dimensions field, I now have a height, a width, and a depth that the user can add for each individual submission. This is very helpful for sort of figuring out when you get submissions in how big they're going to take if you know you have a set amount of space in a gallery. Next, we have the web address. And the web address is where a user can either, one, enter a URL for their own website, or two, they can enter a URL for maybe a YouTube video, or maybe a Vimeo video, or an MP3 on SoundCloud, and a few other things like that, and will automatically embed that video into your call. Maybe they have a Google Doc or a zip file that's hosted on Google Drive or Dropbox link. Those things are what the web address is used for. And then lastly, the sale price. If you do have a sale price, if you want users to enter a sale price, it's important that you use the built-in sale price field like we've done here, because this will enable automatic tag generation with the correct currency code and a few things like that behind the scenes. And that's how those additional fields work. Lastly here, back in the Edit Submission settings, you have custom submission fields just like you do have custom registration fields. So you can maybe say, I need to know the year created, and I can go ahead and add that as a text field, and then the user would be able to type in which year their artwork was created. And you can add up to 10, just like with registration, additional submission fields. At the very bottom you'll see the submission attachment settings, and you can provide additional instructions. These instructions will appear on that Add Images page. You can limit how many applications, or rather how many attachments are able to be added for each individual submission or application. You can change the minimum dimension and the maximum dimension for your sizing. We recommend leaving this at 960 by 1920. That seems to fit about 95% of all calls. And you can also, if you want to, limit specific file types. If you only want your users to be able to upload JPEG images, select JPEG and hit Update. If you leave it blank, it will allow for all.